Chapter 1. The blood-priced rain came down like judgment. Alara pressed herself against the crumbling stone wall of the alley, her breath visible in the October cold. Her hands shook not from the weather, but from the weight of the envelope hidden inside her. Coat, evidence, names, transactions that would ruin men who thought themselves untouchable. She'd been a fool to think they wouldn't notice. The footsteps behind her had been following for 3 blocks now, slow and deliberate, the rhythm of a predator who knew the prey had nowhere left to run. She'd tried the main streets first, but the gas lamps were dark tonight, all of them, as if someone had paid the lamplighter to look away. So she'd ducked into the warrens behind the old cathedral quarter, where even the police didn't venture after dark, where worse things than corrupt businessmen waited. You should have stayed in your little bookshop, Miss Thorne. The voice came from the mouth of the alley. A man stepped forward, flanked by 2 others. She recognized him, Victor Ashland, the banker's son, the one whose signature appeared most frequently in the ledgers she'd stolen. His smile was the kind that promised consequences. "Give me the papers," he said, extending a gloved hand, "and perhaps we'll let you disappear quietly. A ticket to the continent, a new name. Isn't that better than the alternative?" Alara's fingers curled around the envelope. 3 months she'd spent gathering this proof. 3 months since she'd discovered her employer, the respected antiquarian who'd given her refuge, after her father's scandal had been selling forged provenance to launder money for half of London's criminal elite. 3 months since she'd realized the comfortable life she'd rebuilt was founded on blood. "No," she said quietly. Victor's smile died. "Then you've chosen the hard way." They moved faster than they should have. One moment they were advancing, the next they were on her. Alara screamed, swinging her bag as a weapon, but hands locked around her wrists with inhuman strength. The envelope tumbled free. Victor bent to retrieve it, and in the gaslight, she saw something that stopped her breath. His shadow didn't match his body. It twisted wrong, too long, with angles that hurt to perceive. And when he straightened, his eyes caught the light like an animal's, reflective, hungry, not quite human. "Did you really think this was about money?" He tilted his head, studying her the way a cat studies a wounded bird. "The ledgers, the transactions, they're just the surface, Miss Thorne. Convenient crimes to explain away what we really do in the dark." The men holding her weren't men at all. Their grips were ice cold, even through her sleeves, and when one leaned close, she smelled earth and old stone and something sweet sick underneath, like flowers left too long on a grave. Vampires. The word surfaced from half-remembered folklore, from stories she'd catalogued in the bookshop and never quite believed. But here, in this lightless alley, with rain pounding down and hands like iron chains holding her still, belief didn't matter. Only survival. "What do you want?" Her voice cracked. "What we've always wanted." Victor tucked the envelope inside his coat. "Discretion. This city has belonged to the houses for 200 years, Miss Thorne. We've bought every institution, every authority, every truth that matters. You cannot expose us. You can only." The attack came from above. Something massive struck the vampire holding Alara's left arm, and she heard bone shatter with a sound like breaking pottery. The creature released her with a shriek, stumbling back. She twisted, trying to run, but the second vampire yanked her close, baring teeth that were too sharp to many, filling a mouth that had opened too wide. Then he was gone, ripped away by a figure that moved like silk and smoke. Alara fell to her knees in the mud, gasping. Through the rain, she saw the newcomer, a man, or something wearing a man's shape, tall, dressed in black that seemed to drink the available light, with pale hair pulled back from features that would have been beautiful if they weren't so utterly cold. He held one of Victor's companions by the throat, dangling him effortlessly off the ground. "The girl is under the covenant," the stranger said. His voice was quiet, cultured, and somehow more terrifying than the screaming. "You know the law, Ashland. Feeding without consent within the cathedral bounds is forbidden. She stole from our associates. Your associates are human criminals who happen to serve House Ashland. Their crimes do not grant you hunting rights over witnesses." The stranger's grip tightened, and the vampire he held began to make choking sounds. "Or did your house forget which treaties keep us from open war?" Victor backed away, hands raised. "Lord Kane, I didn't realize she was marked." "She wasn't. She is now." The stranger, Lord Kane, dropped the vampire he'd been holding and turned to Alara. His eyes were gray, storm-colored, and ancient. "You have a choice, Miss Thorne. Come with me, and live under House Kane's protection, bound by our laws and customs. Or stay, and let the Ashlands finish what they started. Decide quickly. Alara looked between them. Victor and his creatures, still watching, still hungry. And this Lord Kane offering sanctuary, that felt like a different kind of trap, but Victor would kill her. She knew that with sudden, crystalline certainty. This other monster merely wanted to own her. I'll come, she whispered. Lord Kane extended his hand. His skin was corpse pale, and she could see dark veins beneath the surface, like ink under paper. When she took it, his fingers were cold enough to burn. Then you are claimed, he said, and pulled her to her feet. Welcome to House Kane, Miss Thorne. Try not to disappoint me. Chapter 2. The mansion of shadows. The carriage that waited at the alley's end was black lacquer and silver fittings, drawn by horses whose breath didn't steam in the cold. Alara climbed inside with Lord Kane's hand still wrapped around hers, half escort and half restraint. As if he expected her to bolt the moment his attention wavered. She might have. If she could feel her legs, the interior smelled of old leather and something else, myrrh, perhaps, or aged wood. Lord Kane released her, only to close the door, shutting out the rain and the watching eyes of the Ashland vampires. Then he settled across from her, arranging himself with the careful precision of a man who'd learned to move among fragile things. You're shaking, he observed. Alara pressed her hands together to still them. You killed one of them. I removed a threat to property I'd just claimed. That's different. His tone was matter of fact, almost bored. The Ashlands will complain to the Night Council, of course. I'll be fined or censured, forced to make some tedious political concession. But you'll be alive, so the accounting balances, property. The word settled in her chest like a stone. What does that mean? She asked. Being claimed by your house? It means you live under my roof, abide by my rules, and accept my protection from the other houses who might wish you harm. Lord Kane tilted his head, studying her with those unsettling gray eyes. In exchange, you do not reveal what you've learned about our kind. You do not flee. You do not invite enemies across our threshold. Standard terms. And if I refuse? Then I rescind my claim, and the Ashlands retrieve what they believe is theirs. He said it without inflection, without threat. A simple statement of cause and effect. You made your choice in the alley, Miss Thorne. Now you must live with the consequences. The carriage jolted into motion. Alara gripped the edge of the seat, watching through the rain-streaked window as familiar streets gave way to unfamiliar ones. They were heading north, toward the old estates beyond the city proper, where ancient families kept sprawling grounds and asked no questions of their neighbors, where monsters could live undisturbed. How many of you are there? The question escaped before she could stop it. In London? 7 great houses, each controlling territories and blood rights negotiated over centuries. House Kane is the eldest. House Ashland is ambitious and poorly disciplined. A pause. There are also the unaligned vampires without house protection, who feed at their own risk and die easily. You make it sound like politics. It is politics. Blood politics with higher stakes than your human governments play for, but politics nonetheless. Lord Kane's gaze hadn't left her face. We do not hunt freely, Miss Thorne. We do not slaughter indiscriminately. The covenant binds us to feed only with consent, to protect our territories, to maintain the great lie that lets your kind sleep soundly at night, the lie that you don't exist. Precisely. The carriage turned through tall iron gates that opened without anyone touching them. Beyond, a drive wound through manicured grounds toward a house that was too large to be called a house, a mansion of gray stone and pointed arches, with towers that clawed at the night sky. Lights burned in some windows, but they were dim, flickering, the kind that came from candles rather than gas. Alara's throat tightened. This is where you live? This is where House Kane has lived for 12 generations of your kind. The carriage stopped before broad stone steps. Lord Kane opened the door himself and descended, then turned back to offer his hand. Welcome to Thornfield Manor, Miss Thorne. An amusing coincidence, the shared name. Perhaps fate has a sense of humor. After all, she didn't take his hand this time, climbing down on her own. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with mist, and the ground stretched in all directions, gardens gone half wild, statuary green with moss, hedges that needed trimming decades ago. It should have looked abandoned. Instead, it looked patient, as if waiting for something to happen. The front doors opened as they approached. A woman stood in the entrance, pale, dark-haired, dressed in severe gray that might have been mourning clothes or simply fashion from another century. Her eyes swept over Alara with cool assessment. Another stray Adrian? Her voice carried the faint accent of somewhere eastern. And here I thought you'd given up that particular hobby. This is Miss Alara Thorne, Lord Kane said. She'll be staying in the East Wing. See that she has everything required: clothing, toiletries, access to the library but not the lower levels. Standard guest protocols, of course. The woman's smile was sharp. I am Katerina, Miss Thorne, seneschal of this house. If you need anything, you may ask. Whether you receive it is another matter. She stepped aside, and Alara entered. The interior stole her breath. A grand hall rose 3 stories, lit by hundreds of candles in iron chandeliers. Portraits lined the walls, centuries of faces, all with those same cold, beautiful features, those same ageless eyes. The floor was black and white marble, arranged in patterns that suggested occult geometry. Doorways led to shadowed corridors, and a massive staircase curved upward into darkness. The rules are simple, Lord Kane said from behind her. The East Wing is yours during the day. At night, you stay in your rooms unless summoned. You do not enter the West Wing under any circumstances. You do not speak to other members of the house without my permission. And you do not, under any circumstances, attempt to leave the grounds. Alara turned to face him. I'm a prisoner then. You're protected. There's a difference. His expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes, something that might have been regret or might have been hunger. The Ashlands will test the boundaries. They always do. Until the council settles the matter, you are safest here, where they cannot reach you. And after, when the council decides, that depends on whether you've proven useful enough to keep. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Katerina appeared at Lord Kane's shoulder, holding a candelabra that cast dancing shadows across her face. Come, Miss Thorne, she said. I'll show you to your quarters. You'll want to rest. The sun rises in 4 hours, and this house keeps particular schedules. Alara followed because there was nothing else to do. Glancing back once at Lord Kane, he stood motionless in the center of that vast hall, watching her ascend the stairs with an expression she couldn't read. Predator, protector, prison warden. She didn't know which frightened her most. Chapter 3. The Watcher in the dark. The room Katerina led her to was beautiful in the way old things are beautiful: faded grandeur, worn elegance, the ghost of luxury. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, draped in velvet the color of dried blood. Tall windows looked out over the grounds, though heavy curtains were already drawn against the coming dawn. A fire burned in the marble fireplace, casting warm light over Persian rugs and antique furniture that probably cost more than her father had earned in his lifetime. The wardrobe is stocked, Katerina said, lighting additional candles from her candelabra. The sizes should be adequate. Lord Kane is thorough in his preparations. Alara turned sharply. He knew he was bringing me here? Before tonight? Lord Kane knows many things before they happen. It's tedious, honestly. Katerina set the candelabra on the dresser. There's a bathroom through that door. The water is heated by a modern system, one of the few concessions to your century we've made. Breakfast will be brought at 8. You won't see any of us during the day. We'll be indisposed, sleeping, dying, technically. We do it every dawn. Katerina's smile was thin. Don't look so horrified, Miss Thorne. We're quite used to it by now. She left without another word, the door clicking shut with a finality that made Alara's skin crawl. She stood in the center of the room, still wearing her mud-stained dress, still feeling the ghost of Lord Kane's cold hand wrapped around hers. Property, claimed, useful enough to keep. She moved to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to peer out. The grounds stretched dark and misty, and somewhere in that darkness, she knew the gates were locked, the walls were high, and escape was a fantasy she couldn't afford to entertain. Not yet. The wardrobe did indeed contain clothing, dresses, and rich fabrics, all in deep jewel tones, all styled a decade out of fashion, but impeccably maintained. She chose the simplest, a dark green wool that would be warm, and found undergarments that fit well enough to be unsettling. How long had Lord Kane been planning this? The bathroom was a revelation: white tile and brass fixtures, a deep tub that called to her aching muscles. She bathed quickly, half expecting Katerina or Lord Kane, or some other creature to walk in, but no one came. The water was indeed hot, almost scalding. and she scrubbed away the alley's mud and Victor Ashland's touch until her skin was red. When she emerged, dressed in the green wool, with her hair still damp, the fire had burned lower. Dawn couldn't be far off. She should sleep. God knew she was exhausted, but her mind wouldn't settle. Instead, she found herself at the door, testing the handle. It turned, unlocked. Alara stood in the doorway, heart pounding. Lord Kane had said the East Wing was hers during the day. Did that mean it was forbidden at night, or merely dangerous? The corridor beyond was lit by wall sconces, their flames guttering in drafts she couldn't identify. She stepped out, barefoot on cold marble, and listened. The house was utterly silent, no servants moving, no distant conversations. Nothing but the creak of old wood settling, and the whisper of air through unseen spaces. She moved carefully, trailing one hand along the wall. Other doors lined the corridor, all closed. At the end, a gallery overlooked the grand hall below, and she approached it slowly, peering down at the vast empty space, with its portraits and geometry and shadows that seemed deeper than they should be. You should be sleeping. Alara spun, biting back a scream. Lord Kane stood in the corridor behind her, appearing from nowhere like smoke taking shape. He'd removed his coat, and in shirt sleeves and waistcoat he looked almost human except for the inhuman stillness. The way he didn't breathe, didn't blink. The door was unlocked, she said, hating how her voice shook. Yes, I don't believe in unnecessary locks. He moved closer, soundless. But I do believe in obedience. I told you to stay in your room at night. You said unless summoned. I didn't summon you. They stared at each other across 3 feet of shadowed corridor. This close, Alara could see details she'd missed before, the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, suggesting he'd been turned in his late 30s. The careful tailoring of his clothes, expensive but understated. The way his hands, pale and long-fingered, rested loose at his sides, ready to move faster than she could perceive. What are you doing awake? She asked. Katerina said you'd be dying. Dawn is an hour away still, and someone needs to ensure our newest guest doesn't do anything foolish. His head tilted slightly, like attempting to leave, for instance. I wasn't. You were considering it. I can hear your heartbeat, Miss Thorne. It speeds when you lie. He took another step forward, and she backed against the gallery railing. You're trying to map the house, looking for exits, weighing your chances of survival if you run. Alara lifted her chin. Can you blame me? No, I'd be disappointed if you weren't. Something that might have been approval flickered in his expression. But you should understand the grounds are warded, the gates sealed, and the Ashlands are watching from beyond our borders, waiting for you to set one foot outside my protection. You wouldn't make it to the road. So I'm trapped here forever? Not forever. Just until the council rules on your case. He paused. Or until you prove valuable enough that I petition for permanent residency. As what? A servant? A pet? As whatever you make of yourself. Lord Kane's gaze sharpened. You were a researcher, weren't you? In that bookshop. Provenance? Authentication? Historical documentation? She blinked at the shift. Yes. How did you? I make it my business to know who enters my territory carrying evidence of our kind's activities. He gestured toward the portraits lining the walls. House Kane maintains the most extensive private collection of supernatural history in England. 3 centuries of documents, journals, treaties, and records. Most of it uncatalogued. Much of it in languages your modern scholars no longer read. Understanding dawned slowly. You want me to organize it. I want you to prove you're worth protecting. The council won't rule favorably based on sentiment, Miss Thorne. They'll ask what value you bring to our kind. What purpose your continued existence serves. His voice was clinical, but his eyes held something else, a test, perhaps. Or a challenge. Give me a reason to argue for your life. Alara's hands gripped the railing behind her. A gilded cage was still a cage, but a cage with books, with history, with purpose. I'll need access to the collection, she said carefully. You'll have it. During daylight hours, when the house sleeps and you're safest working alone, and at night. At night, you stay in your room. Unless I summon you. Lord Kane turned as if to leave, then paused. One more thing. You'll see things in this house that will frighten you. Hear things that will disturb you. My brothers are not as restrained as I am. If you encounter any of them, do not engage. Do not run. Simply bow your head and return to your wing. Do you understand? Your brothers? House Kane is more than just me, Miss Thorne. You'll meet them soon enough. His smile was brief and utterly without warmth. Try to survive the introduction. Then he was gone, melting back into shadow, leaving her alone in the corridor, with dawn creeping closer and questions she didn't dare ask aloud. Alara returned to her room and locked the door. This time, though she suspected it wouldn't matter, if Lord Cain wanted to reach her, no lock would stop him. Chapter 4. Threads of trust. Alara woke to sunlight streaming through gaps in the curtains and the smell of fresh bread. For a moment, she forgot where she was, then memory crashed back. The alley. Victor Ashland's inhuman eyes. Lord Cain's cold hand pulling her into a carriage that carried her away from everything she knew. A tray sat on the table beside her bed. Tea, still steaming. Toast with butter and jam. Soft-boiled eggs in delicate china cups. Someone had entered while she slept. Silent as ghosts, she ate mechanically, trying to settle her nerves. The house felt different in daylight, less oppressive, almost peaceful. Through the window she could see the overgrown gardens properly now, the tangled roses and crumbling statuary. Beautiful in their decay. Dead things, she thought, can still be beautiful. After breakfast, she dressed in a simpler day gown from the wardrobe, navy blue with minimal trim, and ventured into the corridor. In daylight, it was just a hallway, absent the menace of the previous night. She found the stairs and descended, half expecting to encounter someone, but the house was utterly empty. They're dying, Katerina had said. All of them, somewhere in this vast mansion, lying in whatever darkness they required. The thought made her skin crawl. The library wasn't difficult to find. She simply followed the smell of old paper and leather. Double doors stood open at the end of the main corridor, revealing a room that stole her breath. It was enormous. 3 stories tall, with galleries running along the upper levels and rolling ladders to reach the highest shelves. Every wall was books, thousands upon thousands of them, leather-bound and cloth-bound, and some that looked older than the printing press. Tables were stacked with loose documents, scrolls, folders tied with ribbon. Dust motes danced in shafts of sunlight from tall windows, and the silence was the particular silence of accumulated knowledge. Alara stepped inside, reverent. Her fingers trailed along spines as she walked. Latin, Greek, what looked like Arabic or perhaps Persian. Languages she recognized and languages she didn't. A lifetime of work waited here. 10 lifetimes. Miss Thorne. She jumped, spinning. A young man stood in the doorway. No, not young. He had that same ageless quality as Lord Cain, though his features were softer, almost gentle. Dark hair, dark eyes, dressed in a simple shirt and trousers. He held a stack of books against his chest. I'm sorry, he said quickly. I didn't mean to startle you. I'm Thomas. I help maintain the collection. She stopped, unsure how to ask. Human? Yes. He smiled, and it was genuine. Lord Cain employs several of us. Daylight staff were called. Someone has to tend the house while they sleep. Relief flooded through her. I thought I was alone. Never entirely alone in Thornfield, though it can feel that way. Thomas set his books on a nearby table. Lord Cain said you'd be cataloging? I can show you the system we've been using, though I'll warn you it's incomplete. Previous researchers have tried and, well, it's an overwhelming task. What happened to them? They finished their contracts and left. Most of them. Thomas's expression clouded slightly. One went mad, insisted. The books whispered to him. Another simply disappeared one night, though Lord Cain said she'd violated terms and been released from service. We don't ask too many questions here, Miss Thorne. It's safer that way. He showed her the cataloging system, handwritten cards in wooden boxes, cross-referenced by subject, language, and date when known. Many entries were marked with question marks or contradictory information. Entire sections had never been properly documented. Start wherever you like, Thomas said. Just don't venture into the West Wing archives without Lord Cain's explicit permission. Those are restricted even from me. What's in there? Things that predate the covenant. Records from before the houses agreed to their current laws. He lowered his voice. Dangerous knowledge, if you believe the stories. After Thomas left, Alara lost herself in the work. It was easier than thinking about her situation. She pulled volumes at random, examining them with the trained eye she'd developed in the bookshop. A grimoire from the 14th century, its margins filled with blood-red annotations. A journal in what looked like medieval French, detailing the establishment of House Cain. Treaties written in multiple languages, signed with seals she didn't recognize. Hours passed. The sun tracked across the sky. She made notes, started new catalog cards, organized stacks by probable date. It was familiar work, comforting in its precision. For a while, she could almost forget she was a prisoner. Almost. The sun was setting when she heard footsteps. She looked up from a particularly fascinating treatise on blood bonds to find Lord Kane in the doorway, watching her. He wore different clothes, a dark suit, perfectly tailored, and his hair was still damp, as if he'd bathed upon waking. "You're still here," he observed. "You gave me a task." Alara closed the book carefully. "I'm completing it." He entered the library, moving between the tables with that unnatural grace. Most people in your situation would spend the day attempting escape, or weeping, or plotting revenge. I considered all three. This seemed more productive. Something that might have been amusement crossed his face. He picked up one of the catalog cards she'd completed, reading her neat handwriting. "Your hand is excellent, educated, but not aristocratic. Middle-class pretensions to gentility. My father was a clerk before his disgrace. He taught me properly. The embezzlement scandal. 3 years ago." Lord Kane set the card down. "He hanged himself rather than face trial. You were left penniless, unemployable under your real name. The bookshop owner took you on as charity." Alara's jaw tightened. "You've been thorough. I told you. I know everyone in my territory." He moved to the window, looking out at the darkening grounds. "Your father was innocent, incidentally, framed by his employer, who needed a scapegoat for his own theft. The evidence was fabricated." The words hit like a physical blow. "How do you?" "Because the employer was a business partner of House Ashland. They arranged the entire affair to acquire your father's position for one of their human servants." Lord Kane's reflection in the glass was colorless, ghost-like. "They're quite good at destroying lives when it serves their purposes." Alara stood, hands shaking. "You knew this? All this time?" "I learned it after your father's death. By then, there was nothing to be done. The covenant forbids direct intervention in human affairs unless our kind is threatened." He turned to face her. "I'm sorry, Miss Thorne. For what little that's worth." "Sorry." The word tasted bitter. "My father died believing he'd failed us. My mother drank herself to death within the year. I lost everything, our home, our name, our future. And you're sorry?" "Yes." The simple honesty of it stopped her anger cold. Lord Kane crossed the space between them, and she saw something in his face she hadn't expected. Regret. Real, genuine regret. "The rules that bind us are old and inflexible," he said quietly. "They've kept the peace between our kinds for centuries, but they exact a cost. I've watched countless innocent humans suffer because the covenant forbids us to act. Your father was one of many. Then why have rules at all? Because without them, we'd be at war. And in war, Miss Thorne, your kind always loses." He paused. "I cannot give you back what the Ashlands took, but I can give you this truth, purpose, and protection. It's not justice, but it's what I have to offer." Alara looked at him, this creature who'd lived centuries, who'd watched empires rise and fall, who stood in the ruins of his own making and called it mercy. He was right. It wasn't justice, but it was something. "The treaty on blood bonds," she said finally. "The one I was reading. It mentions consent-based feeding. What does that mean exactly?" Lord Kane's expression shifted, became carefully neutral. "It means we do not take blood without permission. Not from humans under our protection, and not from those in our territory without negotiation. And if someone consents, then the exchange is legal under house law." His eyes held hers. "Why do you ask?" Because she was considering possibilities. Because knowledge was power, and she had so little of either. Because if she was going to survive in this world, she needed to understand its currency. "No reason." She lied. His smile was slight, knowing. "Your heartbeat says otherwise. But I'll let you keep your secrets, Miss Thorne. For now." He left her then, and Alara stood among the ancient books, feeling something shift in her chest. Not trust. Not yet. But perhaps the first fragile thread of it. Chapter 5. The brothers Kane dinner arrived on a silver tray at 8 o'clock. Roasted chicken, root vegetables, wine in a crystal glass. Alara ate alone in her room, watching darkness settle over the grounds like a shroud. Somewhere below, the house was waking. She could feel it, a subtle change in the air. As if the building itself exhaled after holding its breath all day. She'd just finished eating when the screaming started. It came from somewhere deep in the house, a woman's voice. High and terrified, cut off abruptly. Alara froze, wine glass halfway to her lips. Silence rushed back, thick and waiting. Then laughter, male and cruel, echoing through the corridors. Stay in your room at night, Lord Kane had said. She set down the glass with shaking hands and moved to lock her door. But even as she turned the key, she heard footsteps in the hallway, multiple sets, moving with that too quick vampire gait. They stopped outside her room. She's in there, a voice said, young, amused. I can smell her fear. It's delicious, Adrian said, not to touch her. This voice was older, bored. She's under his personal protection, Adrian's pet project. How tedious. The door handle rattled, testing the lock. Just one little taste. He'd never know. Alara backed away from the door, looking wildly for anything she could use as a weapon. A letter opener on the desk, useless against vampires. The fireplace poker better, but still hopeless. Her heart hammered so loudly she was certain they could hear it. Enough, Marcus. The new voice was quiet, but carried absolute authority. The handle stopped rattling. Through the door, Alara heard someone sigh dramatically. You're no fun, Sebastian. I'm sensible. There's a difference. Now go find entertainment elsewhere before Adrian discovers you harassing his guest. Footsteps retreated. A pause, then a soft knock on the door, polite, almost apologetic. Miss Thorne? I'm Sebastian Kane. I apologize for my brother's enthusiasm. You're quite safe. I give you my word. Alara approached the door slowly. How do I know that? You don't, but I'm still standing here, rather than breaking down your door, which should count for something. A pause. Adrian asked me to check on you, to ensure you had everything you needed. She unlocked the door and opened it a crack. The man outside was tall, dark-haired, with features similar to Lord Kane's, but harder, more severe. He wore elegant evening clothes and held himself with military precision. His eyes were brown rather than gray, but they had that same ancient quality. Sebastian Kane, he repeated, offering a slight bow. Second of House Kane. The idiot who was just here was Marcus, our youngest. You'll meet the others eventually, though I'd recommend putting it off as long as possible. How many of you are there? 4 brothers in total. Adrian, myself, Lucian, and Marcus. We've been together for, he paused, calculating, 347 years, give or take a decade. It's created certain dynamics. Despite herself, Alara felt her fear ebbing slightly. There was something straightforward about Sebastian, less unsettling than Lord Kane's measured control. The woman who screamed, a willing donor from the city. She comes twice a month, accepts payment, and leaves satisfied. The scream was theatrical. Marcus likes to feel dangerous. Sebastian's expression tightened with distaste. He's young for our kind. Only turned in 1802. Still playing at being a monster. And you're not? Monsters, I mean? Oh, we absolutely are. But we're civilized monsters, Miss Thorne. We follow rules, maintain order, and generally avoid unnecessary carnage. He glanced down the corridor, then back to her. Adrian's in his study. He'd like to see you, if you're willing, and if I'm not, then you stay here, and I'll tell him you were too frightened to come out. He'll understand, or he'll brood about it for several hours. Hard to predict with Adrian. Sebastian's smile was brief, but I suspect you're curious. You've been investigating our library all day. Surely you have questions only he can answer. She did. God help her, she did. Lead the way, Alara said, stepping into the corridor. Sebastian guided her through the house, pointing out landmarks as they went. East wing is yours, bedrooms, private sitting rooms, the small library. Main floor is common areas, dining room we never use, drawing rooms for entertaining guests we rarely have, the grand library you've been haunting. West wing is private, Adrian's quarters, the vault, the old archives. Never go there uninvited. They climbed a staircase to the second floor, where the corridors grew narrower, more intimate. Gas lamps had been lit here, casting warm light that seemed at odds with the building's gothic severity. Sebastian stopped before a heavy oak door. Fair warning, Adrian's mood is unpredictable tonight. The council sent a messenger this afternoon. The Ashlands have filed formal complaint about your acquisition. He knocked twice. It's complicated matters. The door opened. Lord Kane stood backlit by firelight, still in his dark suit, hair falling loose around his shoulders. Now, he looked tired, Alara thought, then dismissed the notion as absurd. Vampires didn't get tired. Thank you, Sebastian, he said. You can go. Sebastian departed with another slight bow, leaving Alara alone with Lord Kane. The study beyond was smaller than she'd expected, lined with books, dominated by a massive desk covered in papers and correspondence. A fire burned in the grate, and 2 chairs faced it. "Sit," Lord Kane said, gesturing to one. "We need to talk." She sat, watching as he poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. He handed her one brandy, by the smell, and took the other for himself, though she doubted he'd drink it. "The council has accelerated your hearing," he said without preamble. "It will be held in 3 days, rather than the usual month. The Ashlands are pressing hard, claiming I violated the covenant by interfering in their lawful retrieval of stolen property. I'm not property, to them. You became property the moment you stole evidence of their activities. To me, you became property when I claimed you. The council will decide which claim holds precedence." He swirled the brandy, watching firelight play through it. "You need to understand what this means, Miss Thorne. If they rule in Ashland's favor, I must surrender you. If I refuse, it means war between houses." Her throat tightened. "Would you? Refuse, I mean?" "I don't know yet." His honesty was startling. "It depends on several factors. Your value, the political cost, whether I believe the Ashlands will actually kill you, or simply silence you and set you free. They'll kill me, probably." Victor Ashland doesn't forgive embarrassment. Lord Kane set down his glass and touched. "Which brings me to why I asked you here. I need you to tell me everything you learned about their operation. Every detail, every name, every transaction. If I'm going to argue for your life before the council, I need ammunition." Alara studied him, this ancient creature who spoke of her death with clinical detachment while offering protection she didn't fully trust. The firelight caught the planes of his face, made him look almost human. "Almost. Why?" she asked. "Why does it matter to you if I live or die?" Something flickered in his eyes. "Pain, perhaps, or memory. Because I'm tired of watching the Ashlands destroy innocent lives. Because you remind me of someone I failed to save, a long time ago. Because," he paused, seeming to struggle with the words, "because I want to believe some good can still come from this cursed existence." The vulnerability in his voice cracked something in her chest. She thought of her father, dead for crimes he didn't commit. Her mother, drowned in grief and gin. All the years she'd spent rebuilding from ruins the Ashlands had created. "All right," she said. "I'll tell you everything. And for the next 2 hours." While the fire burned low and the night deepened outside, Alara Thorne traded secrets with a vampire lord and tried not to notice how his cold presence had started to feel like safety. Chapter 6. The Seagoth attack came on the second night. Alara woke to the sound of shattering glass and ran to her window. Below, figures moved through the gardens, too many to count, too fast to be human. They poured over the walls like water, dark shapes against darker grounds, converging on the house from all directions. The Ashlands had come. Her door burst open. Sebastian stood there, coat billowing, a sword in his hand that looked older than nations. "Get dressed, now, something sturdy. You can move in." "What's happening?" "They're breaching the wards. Adrian's trying to hold them, but there are too many." He tossed her a heavy cloak. "We're evacuating you to the vault. It's the most defensible position." Alara threw the cloak over her nightgown and ran after him into the corridor. The house had erupted into chaos, servants fleeing, vampires moving with supernatural speed, the crash and roar of combat from below. Through the gallery railing, she glimpsed the grand hall transformed into a battlefield. Lord Kane stood at the center, facing a dozen vampires in Ashland crimson. His movements were liquid, impossibly fast, a blade appearing in his hand as if conjured from air. She watched him decapitate one attacker, pivot to impale another, his face utterly calm, even as blood black in the firelight sprayed across the marble. "Don't watch," Sebastian said, pulling her away. "He doesn't like witnesses when he's like this." They descended a back staircase, Sebastian moving ahead to check corners. Twice, he stopped her with a raised hand as fighting erupted nearby, the wet sounds of tearing flesh, screams that ended abruptly. Alara's hands shook, but she kept moving, kept her breathing steady. The vault was in the lowest level of the house, access through a door concealed behind a bookcase in the west wing. Sebastian worked the mechanism with practiced efficiency, and the wall swung inward to reveal stone steps leading down into darkness. Inside, he ordered, "There's a chamber at the bottom. Lock yourself in and don't open it for anyone but Adrian or me. We'll use the password Thornfield. Anything else is a trick. Wait, you're not coming? I'm needed upstairs." He pressed something into her hand, a dagger, silver-bladed and wickedly sharp. Iron and silver. It won't kill them, but it'll slow them down. Aim for the eyes or throat." Then he was gone, and Alara stood alone at the top of the stairs, staring down into absolute blackness. From above, she heard the sounds of battle, intensifying roars, crashes, the splintering of wood. The house was being torn apart. She descended. The stairs went down farther than seemed possible, cut into bedrock, lit only by her trembling hand trailing along the wall. At the bottom, a corridor stretched ahead, and at its end, a heavy iron door. She reached it and fumbled with the bolt, her fingers clumsy with fear. The door swung open onto a small chamber, bare stone walls, a cot, shelves stocked with water and preserved food. A sanctuary or a tomb, depending on how this night ended. She stepped inside and was about to close the door when she heard footsteps on the stairs behind her, fast footsteps, vampire fast. Alara pressed herself against the wall beside the door, gripping Sebastian's dagger. The footsteps grew louder, closer. A shadow fell across the threshold. "Miss Thorne?" Victor Ashland's voice, smooth as poison. "I know you're down here. There's nowhere left to run." She held her breath, counting heartbeats. He stepped into view, and even in the darkness, his eyes gleamed with predatory satisfaction. "The council forbids this incursion," she said, hating the tremor in her voice. "You're violating the covenant. The council is 3 days away from ruling in our favor anyway. This simply accelerates the timeline." Victor moved into the chamber, cutting off her escape route. "You cost me something precious, Miss Thorne. My reputation, my standing with the elders. They've been questioning my competence ever since Cain stole you from under my nose. I was never yours to steal. Everything in this city is ours. Every human, every transaction, every secret." He smiled, showing too many teeth. "But I'll admit, Cain was clever, claiming you before we could finish the kill. It forced us to go through official channels, to play by rules that favor the older houses. So you're breaking those rules. I'm correcting an error." He lunged. Alara swung the dagger with all her strength. She'd been aiming for his throat, but caught his shoulder instead. The silver blade sank deep, and Victor screamed a sound like tearing metal. He stumbled back, clawing at the weapon, and she saw smoke rising from the wound. "Silver," he hissed. "That bastard gave you silver." She ran, out of the chamber, down the corridor, back toward the stairs. Victor's footsteps pounded behind her, slower now, but still impossibly fast. She hit the stairs and climbed, her lungs burning, her legs screaming. Behind her, Victor laughed, a sound edged with pain and rage. "You think you can outrun me? I've been hunting for centuries." His words cut off with a wet gurgle. Alara looked back. Lord Cain stood 3 steps below Victor, one hand buried in the younger vampire's chest. He'd come from nowhere, materialized like smoke, and his face was terrible in its cold fury. "You violated my house," Lord Cain said quietly. "You broke the sanctity of the vault. You threatened what is mine." He pulled his hand free, and Victor collapsed, gasping. Lord Cain stepped over him without a second glance, and climbed to where Alara stood frozen. "Are you hurt?" His hands found her shoulders, turned her to check for injuries. His touch was ice cold, but somehow steadying. "No, the dagger worked. Sebastian gave me, I know. I heard." He released her, and she saw his clothes were soaked in blood. Not his own, she thought. The house is secure. Most of the Ashlands are dead or fled. Victor was the only one who made it this far. Is he dying? Silver to the heart takes time with our kind, but it's inevitable. Lord Cain looked down at Victor's twitching form. "The council will have no choice now. The Ashlands declared war the moment they breached my wards." Alara's legs finally gave out. She sat down hard on the stone steps, shaking uncontrollably. Lord Cain crouched beside her, and when he spoke again, his voice was gentler. "You did well. Most humans freeze when confronted by our kind. You fought back." "I was terrified." Terror and action aren't mutually exclusive. He touched her face just. A brush of cold fingers against her cheek, and she found herself leaning into it despite everything. "Come, let me get you out of this place. The vault carries too many ghosts tonight." He helped her stand and guided her back up the stairs, one hand steady at her elbow. As they climbed, Alara realized something had shifted between them. Some barrier had fallen in the violence and fear. She'd saved herself with a weapon he'd provided, and he'd come for her when she needed him most. Trust, she thought. This is what the beginning of trust feels like, even if it came wrapped in blood and darkness. Chapter 7. The Feluthi Grand Hall was a massacre. Bodies lay sprawled across the black and white marble, some beheaded, some impaled, all of them slowly turning to ash as dawn approached. Servants moved through the carnage with grim efficiency, collecting weapons and scrubbing blood from the floors. The portraits on the walls watched with painted eyes. As if this were nothing they hadn't seen before, Alara stood at the edge of it all. The cloak pulled tight around her nightgown, trying not to look at the faces of the dead. They'd been people once, she reminded herself, turned against their will or seduced by promises of power, but people nonetheless. 17 dead, Sebastian reported to Lord Kane, his sword still drawn and dripping. 5 escaped over the east wall. Marcus is tracking them, but they're fast. Let them go. Lord Kane stood by the fireplace, staring into flames that seemed too low to warm anything. Let them report back to what's left of House Ashland. Let them tell the council what happens when treaties are broken. Adrian, a new voice, cultured and faintly amused. Alara turned to see another vampire descending the stairs, taller than the others, with golden hair and features so perfect they looked carved rather than born. The Night Council's messenger is here. They want to report immediately. Of course they do. Lord Kane didn't turn from the fire. Tell them I'll provide a full accounting in writing. The scene speaks for itself. They want it now. From you. In person. The golden-haired vampire's gaze slid to Alara. And they want to see the girl. Assess whether she was worth this bloodshed. Lucian, I'm only the messenger, brother. Don't shoot me. Lucian offered Alara a slight bow. Lucian Kane, third of the house. Charmed, I'm sure. You've caused quite the stir, Miss Thorne. Lord Kane finally turned, and Alara saw exhaustion in every line of his face. Not physical exhaustion, vampires didn't tire that way, but something deeper. A weariness of the soul. The council can wait until tomorrow night, he said. Miss Thorne has been through enough this evening. The council doesn't wait, Adrian. You know this. Lucian's smile was sharp. They're convening an emergency session. If you don't present yourself and her within the hour, they'll rule by default. And default favors the Ashlands, broken wards or not. Silence stretched. Lord Kane looked at Alara, and she saw the question in his eyes before he asked it. I won't force you, he said quietly. But if we don't go, we lose any chance of legitimizing your protection. The council will brand you an illegal acquisition, and I'll be ordered to surrender you to whatever's left of House Ashland. And if we go, then you face a room full of ancient vampires who will judge whether your life has sufficient value to justify the deaths that occurred here tonight. He stepped closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear. They'll be cruel, Miss Thorne. They'll test you, try to frighten you, look for any weakness they can exploit. And I won't be able to protect you from their questions. Alara thought of her father, swinging from a rope because the Ashlands needed a scapegoat. Her mother, drinking herself into an early grave. All the years she'd spent invisible, powerless, crushed under the weight of other people's sins. I'll go, she said. I'm tired of running. Something like pride flickered across Lord Kane's face. Then we leave immediately. Sebastian, secure the house. Lucian, send word we're coming. And someone find Marcus before he does something that starts another war. 20 minutes later, Alara sat in the same black carriage that had carried her to Thornfield. Wearing a dress Katerina had found deep burgundy silk that made her look older, more substantial. The seneschal had also provided cosmetics to hide the shadows under her eyes and pin her hair into something resembling respectability. You look like a lady, Katerina had said, studying her work. That will help. The council respects presentation. Lord Kane sat across from her now, changed into formal evening clothes, his hair tied back with a black ribbon. He hadn't spoken since they'd left the house, his gaze fixed on something beyond the carriage window. What will they ask me? Alara broke the silence. They'll want to know what you learned about House Ashland. What evidence you gathered, who you could testify against. They'll assess whether you pose a threat to the masquerade, our great secret. He finally looked at her. And they'll want to know why I claimed you. The real reason, not the political justification I'll provide. What is the real reason? The carriage turned onto a narrow street lined with old townhouses, all dark except for one at the very end. Light blazed from every window, and even from a distance, Alara could feel something oppressive radiating from it. Because watching you in that alley reminded me of my sister, Lord Kane said quietly. 300 years ago, before I was turned. She was cornered by men who meant her harm, and I was too far away to help. By the time I reached her, he stopped, his jaw tight. I've carried that failure ever since. Every decade, every century. When I saw you facing the Ashlands, I thought perhaps this time, I could be fast enough. The confession hung between them, raw and unexpected. Ilara wanted to say something, offer comfort, but the carriage was already stopping. The door opened, revealing Sebastian waiting on the street. The council is assembled, he said. All 7 great houses. They're not pleased, Adrian. They never are. Lord Kane descended and offered Ilara his hand. She took it, feeling the familiar cold that no longer frightened her quite as much. Remember, Miss Thorne, answer their questions honestly, but volunteer nothing. Show respect without servility. And above all, do not show fear. They can smell it, and it makes them hungry. The townhouse door stood open, spilling golden light onto the street. As they climbed the steps, Ilara felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Inside, she could hear voices, old voices, speaking languages that predated English. Lord Kane squeezed her hand once, briefly. Then they crossed the threshold together, into a room full of monsters. Who would decide if she deserved to live? The Night Council waited in a circular chamber lined with black velvet and lit by hundreds of candles. 7 vampires sat in high-backed chairs arranged like a court, each representing a different house. They were beautiful and terrible, ancient and cruel, and when they turned their collective gaze on Ilara, she understood what it meant to be prey. Lord Kane, the eldest, spoke. A woman whose face could have been carved from marble. You've brought the human. How generous. Let us begin. Chapter 8. The night court chamber felt smaller than it was, the weight of immortal attention pressing down like a physical force. Ilara stood beside Lord Kane in the center of the circle, acutely aware that every vampire in the room could kill her before she drew her next breath. The woman who'd spoken, Lady Morgana. Head of House Morgana, gestured with one pale hand. Approach, child. Let us see what caused such disruption. Lord Kane's hand touched the small of Ilara's back, steadying. She stepped forward alone, keeping her chin level, her hands relaxed at her sides. Don't show fear. She'd faced her father's death, her mother's decline, years of poverty and shame. She could face this. State your name for the record, Lady Morgana commanded. Ilara Thorne, and you are aware of what we are. What laws govern our kind? I know you're vampires. I know you've existed in secret for centuries. I know House Ashland broke your laws when they tried to kill me for discovering their criminal activities. A murmur rippled through the council. One of the other vampires, a man with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice, leaned forward. Bold words for prey. You speak as if you have rights in our world. I have the rights Lord Kane granted me when he claimed me under the covenant. Ilara met his gaze, refusing to look away first. Or have your laws become meaningless? Careful, girl. This from a dark-skinned vampire draped in emerald silk. We've existed since before your ancestors learned to write. We do not take kindly to lectures on our own legislation. Then perhaps you should follow it more carefully. The words escaped before Ilara could stop them. She felt Lord Kane tense beside her, but she pressed on. House Ashland framed my father for embezzlement to steal his position. They've been using human businesses to launder money, forge documents, and manipulate your masquerade from within. I have evidence, names, dates, transactions spanning 3 years. And when I threatened to expose them, they tried to murder me in a public street, evidence that is now in Lord Kane's possession, Lady Morgana noted. Convenient for House Kane, isn't it? To acquire both the girl and her intelligence in one stroke? The evidence was always going to surface, Lord Kane said calmly. Miss Thorne planned to take it to the police. I simply ensured it came to the council instead, where it could be properly addressed, or buried, the silver-haired vampire sneered. As we've buried countless inconvenient truths over the centuries, not this time. Ilara pulled a folded paper from her sleeve, one she'd prepared with Katerina before leaving. This is a notarized letter detailing everything I know, deposited with 3 separate solicitors across London. If I die under suspicious circumstances, it will be delivered to every major newspaper in England. Your masquerade will be exposed. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Lady Morgana laughed, a sound like breaking glass. She threatens us. The mortal child threatens the Night Council with exposure. She stood, her gown pooling around her like spilled ink. You have courage, Ilara Thorne. Foolish. Suicidal. Courage, but courage nonetheless. I'm not threatening. I'm negotiating. Ilara's voice didn't shake, though her legs wanted to. I want to live. I want House Ashland held accountable for their crimes against humans and vampires alike. And I want Lord Kane's protection formalized so this matter is settled. You want the vampire and emerald silk rose as well. Let me tell you what I want, child. I want to drain you dry and leave your corpse as a warning to any other human who dares dictate terms to us. Lord Rashid, Lord Kane's voice cracked like a whip. You will not threaten what is mine. Yours. Rashid turned on him. You've had her for 3 days, Adrian. 3 days, and already you speak as if she's family rather than food. This is why we have laws against excessive attachment to mortals. It clouds judgment. My judgment is clear. House Ashland violated the covenant by hunting within cathedral bounds without consent. They violated it again by breaching my wards and attacking my household. 17 of them died in my hall tonight because they refused to accept lawful claim. The question isn't whether I was right to protect Miss Thorne. The question is, what punishment the Ashlands face for their transgressions. The Ashlands are decimated, Lady Morgana said. Victor is dead. We received word an hour ago. The silver poisoning finished him. Their house is in chaos, their leadership scattered. They're hardly a threat anymore. Then formalize Miss Thorne's protection and be done with it. This from a new voice, a young-looking vampire with red hair who'd been silent until now. We waste time on obvious matters while real threats gather. The unaligned have been attacking humans in Whitechapel. 2 bodies were found drained this week. That's the crisis we should address. Lord Brennan makes a fair point, the silver-haired vampire conceded, though I dislike the precedent. If we allow humans to threaten exposure whenever they're inconvenienced, she's not threatening exposure because she's inconvenienced, Lord Kane interrupted. She's threatening it because House Ashland murdered her family and tried to murder her. There's a distinction. Lady Morgana returned to her seat, studying Alara with ancient eyes. Tell me, child, if we grant you this protection, formalize your status within House Kane, what then? You live among us, never aging while decades pass? You watch everyone you know grow old and die while you remain trapped in our world? The question cut deeper than Alara expected. She hadn't thought that far ahead, hadn't let herself imagine a future beyond surviving the next few days. I don't know, she admitted, but I'd rather face that question alive than dead, honest at least. Lady Morgana glanced at the other council members. I call for a vote. All in favor of formalizing Alara Thorne's protection under House Kane, with appropriate restrictions and oversight. Hands rose slowly, reluctantly, but they rose. 5 of 7. Enough. Motion carries. Lady Morgana's smile was cold. Congratulations, Miss Thorne. You're officially property of House Kane, subject to our laws and Lord Kane's authority. Try not to make us regret this decision. Lord Kane's hand found Alara's shoulder, and she felt him exhale relief or something close to it. Thank you, Lady Morgana. The council's wisdom is appreciated. Don't thank me yet, Adrian. We're placing conditions. Lady Morgana stood again, her gaze pinning them both. Miss Thorne remains confined to Thornfield for 6 months. No contact with her former life. No unsupervised time outside House Kane territory. And you, Adrian, will be personally responsible for any breaches. Her crimes become yours. Her exposure becomes your execution. Understood. Then this session is concluded. Lady Morgana waved a dismissive hand. All of you leave. I'm bored of politics for one evening. Outside, the pre-dawn air tasted sweet after the oppressive atmosphere of the council chamber. Alara stood on the townhouse steps, breathing deeply, trying to process what had just happened. She'd won. She'd survived. She was safe, and she was trapped. 6 months, she said quietly. Lord Kane stood beside her, his face unreadable. 6 months. Then we petition for extended residency or negotiate your release. And you? You're responsible for me now. Completely. I was always responsible for you. Now it's simply official. He looked at her, and in the gaslight, his eyes seemed less cold. You did well in there, Miss Thorne. Better than I expected. I was terrified. I know. But you didn't let them see it. Something that might have been a smile touched his lips. Come. Dawn's approaching. Let's go home. Home, she thought as the carriage carried them back through London's sleeping streets. When had Thornfield become home? Chapter 9. The interludithi weeks that followed settled into an unexpected rhythm. Days, Alara worked in the library. The cataloging project consumed her endless volumes and languages living and dead, treaties spanning centuries, journals documenting the rise and fall of vampire houses across Europe. Thomas helped when he could, but much of the work required knowledge only she possessed. Her years authenticating documents in the bookshop had prepared her for this. Though she'd never imagined applying those skills to vampire genealogies and blood oath contracts, nights were different. Lord Kane had begun summoning her after sunset, not to his study this time, but to the conservatory, a glass-roofed room at the back of the house where winter flowers bloomed in defiance of the season. They would sit among the orchids and night-blooming jasmine, and he would teach her. The covenant was written in 1-5-4-2, he explained one evening. Pouring tea she'd requested, and wine he wouldn't drink. After the purge, when humans nearly discovered us, 3,000 vampires died and 50 years hunted, burned, destroyed. The survivors realized we needed laws, structure, a way to exist without drawing attention, so you created rules about feeding. Alara wrapped her hands around the warm cup. Outside, snow had begun to fall, turning the grounds into something from a fairy tale. Consent-based, you said, among other things. We established territories, limited our numbers, agreed to protect the masquerade above all else. He sat across from her, perfectly still in the way only vampires could be. Some chafed at the restrictions. The Ashlands, for instance, have always believed the old ways were better when we ruled openly, kept humans as cattle. But you don't believe that. I believe survival requires adaptation. The world has changed, Miss Thorne. Humans have science now, communication, weapons that could destroy us if they knew where to aim. The covenant keeps us hidden, and being hidden keeps us alive. She studied him over the rim of her cup. In the candlelight, he looked younger than usual, or perhaps she was simply growing accustomed to his agelessness. How old are you exactly? I was born in 1632, turned in 1671, when I was 39. A pause. I've been this age for 354 years. After a while you stop counting. Do you remember what it was like, being human? His expression shifted, became distant, sometimes, in fragments. The taste of bread, the warmth of sunlight, my sister's laugh. He looked at her then, and she saw old pain in his eyes. But mostly, those memories feel like they belong to someone else. A man who died centuries ago. You're still that man, Alara said quietly. Changed, but not lost. You're kind to think so. They fell into comfortable silence, listening to the snow tap against the glass. This had become their pattern: questions and answers, history and philosophy, slowly building understanding between mortal and immortal. Sometimes Sebastian or Lucian would join them, adding their perspectives. Marcus, the youngest, stayed away, though Alara sometimes caught him watching from doorways. He doesn't like me, she'd mentioned to Lord Kane once. He doesn't like change. You represent something new in a household that's remained static for decades. Lord Kane had smiled slightly. Give him time. Marcus is impulsive, but not cruel. Tonight, though, they were alone. Lord Kane rose and moved to the windows, looking out at the snow-covered gardens. The council sent word today, he said. They've formally dissolved House Ashland. The remaining members have been absorbed into other houses or declared unaligned. Alara set down her cup. So it's over. They can't come after me anymore. They can't come after you legally. Whether some of them might try revenge, he shrugged. That's why the 6-month confinement stands. The council wants time for tempers to cool, grudges to fade, and after 6 months, that depends on you. He turned to face her. You could petition for release, return to the human world with financial compensation and House Kane's protection from a distance. Many would choose that, but you could also stay. Formally join the household as a permanent resident. You'd have access to resources most scholars dream of, protection from any threat, purpose in maintaining our history. He paused. You'd also be choosing to live apart from your own kind, to age while we don't, to eventually face the question of whether you want to remain mortal. The implication hung heavy between them. Immortality. The possibility had circled their conversations for weeks, never quite landing. Now here it was, stated plainly. Would you turn me? Alara asked. If I asked? Lord Kane's jaw tightened. I haven't turned anyone in 200 years. Not since. He stopped, shook his head. It's not a gift, Miss Thorne. It's a curse. An endless existence. Watching everyone you love die while you remain unchanged. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But you're not miserable. Are you? He considered this. No, I've found purpose, companionship, moments of beauty in the darkness. But I was given no choice. My turning was violent, Non-consensual a punishment from a vampire I'd crossed. If I were to turn someone now, it would only be with full knowledge of what they were accepting. Then tell me. Help me understand what it really means. So he did. For the next hour, Lord Kane explained the reality of vampirism, the constant hunger that never fully abated, the sun's deadly touch, the way time distorted when you had too much of it, the politics and violence of vampire society, the isolation of watching human friends and lovers age and die over and over until you stopped forming attachments altogether. We're not romantic figures from novels, he said. We're predators who've learned to control our nature through sheer force of will and centuries of practice. Every night is a battle against what we are, yet you still choose kindness, structure, rules that protect humans, because the alternative is monstrosity. He returned to his chair, settling across from her. I've seen what happens when vampires give in completely to their nature. I've watched friends become creatures barely recognizable as the people they were. I refuse to let that happen to me or mine. Alara leaned forward. Teach me more. About your world, your laws, your history. If I'm going to decide my future, I want to understand all of it. Something like approval crossed his face. Very well. But tonight, I want to know something about you. What? What did you love about your old life? Before your father's death, before everything fell apart, what made you happy? The question surprised her. She sat back thinking. Books, learning. My father used to bring home volumes from the estate sales he catalogued. We'd read together in the evenings, discuss history and literature. I felt. She paused, searching for the word. Connected. To the past, to knowledge, to something larger than my small life. And you found that again here. In the library. Yes. She met his eyes. Is that why you gave me this work? Because you knew I'd needed it? I needed a cataloger. You needed purpose. It seemed a fair exchange. His voice softened. But I confess I've enjoyed watching you discover our collection. You look at those volumes the way I remember looking at sunrises. Like they matter. They do matter. I know. I'd simply forgotten how it felt to share that with someone. The moment stretched between them, intimate and fragile. Outside, the snow fell heavier, muffling the world. Inside, the candle light flickered across ancient and mortal faces, building something neither could quite name. Trust had become companionship. Companionship was becoming something more, and both of them knew it, though neither dared speak it aloud. Chapter 10. The Shoisith attack came without warning on a quiet March evening. Alara was in the library, deep in a 14th century manuscript about blood rituals, when the windows exploded inward. Glass rained down as three figures crashed through vampires she didn't recognize, moving with lethal speed. She barely had time to scream before one seized her, fangs bared. Then Sebastian was there, sword flashing, severing the vampire's arm at the elbow. The creature shrieked and released her, stumbling back. Marcus appeared from the opposite door, tackling another attacker with feral abandon. The third lunged for Alara again, but she grabbed the nearest object, a heavy brass candlestick, and swung it with all her strength. It connected with the vampire's temple. The creature staggered, more surprised than hurt, but it gave Sebastian the opening he needed. His blade took the vampire's head in one clean stroke. Get her to Adrian, Sebastian shouted to Marcus. Now. Marcus grabbed Alara's wrist and pulled her toward the corridor. But more vampires were pouring through the shattered windows. 6, 8, too many to count. The library erupted into chaos, books flying as bodies collided, the smell of blood and ash filling the air. Ashland remnants, Marcus hissed, dragging her toward the back stairs. They want revenge for Victor. They made it halfway down the corridor before two more vampires materialized ahead of them. Marcus shoved Alara behind him, his body shifting, bones cracking, muscles warping into something monstrous. She'd never seen a vampire's true form before. It was terrifying and beautiful. All sharp angles and inhuman grace. The fight was brutal and brief. Marcus moved like liquid violence, tearing through the attackers with claws and teeth. But there were too many, and even as he fought, more appeared. They were hurting them, Alara realized, driving them toward the west wing, toward Lord Kane. The study door burst open before they reached it. Lord Kane stood in the threshold, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. His presence filled the corridor, ancient, terrible, absolute. The attacking vampires froze. You dare, he said quietly. Each word was precise, controlled, more frightening than any shout. You dare enter my house, attack my family, touch what is mine. She's not yours. One of the attackers snarled. She destroyed House Ashland. Victor's blood demands. Lord Kane moved. Alara couldn't follow it. One moment he stood in the doorway. The next he was among them, and vampires were dying. Not fighting, dying. He was 300 years older than any of them, and it showed in every economical movement, every precise strike. This wasn't battle. It was execution. In 30 seconds, silence fell. Bodies littered the corridor, already turning to ash. Lord Kane stood at the center of the carnage, not even breathing hard, his clothes splattered with black blood. His eyes found Alara. Are you hurt? She shook her head, unable to speak. Marcus, Sebastian, sweep the grounds. Make certain there are no others. His voice was still that terrible, cold calm. Katerina, secure the house. No one enters or leaves until I say otherwise. They scattered to obey. Lord Kane crossed to Alara and took her face in his hands, tilting it to examine for injuries. His touch was ice cold and achingly gentle. I'm sorry, he said. I should have anticipated this. Should have had better wards, more protection. You saved me. Again. Her voice came out shaky. They would have killed me if you hadn't. They never had a chance. His thumbs brushed her cheeks, and she realized she was crying. I would burn down every house in London before I let them harm you. The intensity in his eyes stole her breath. This wasn't the measured, controlled Lord Kane she'd come to know. This was something rawer, more honest, more dangerous. Adrian, she whispered. Something broke in his expression. He pulled her close, and she went willingly, pressing her face against his chest. He was cold and still, and smelled of blood and old stone, and none of it mattered. His arms wrapped around her, careful despite their strength. And for the first time since the attack began, she felt safe. They stood like that for a long moment. The ash of dead vampires settling around them. I can't do this anymore, Lord Kane said finally, his voice rough. Pretend you're just a responsibility, a political asset, something I'm protecting out of principle. Alara pulled back enough to see his face. What are you saying? I'm saying the past 3 months have been torture. Watching you in my library, listening to you laugh at Sebastian's stories, teaching you our history while pretending I don't want. He stopped, jaw tight. You're mortal, young. You deserve a life free from this darkness. I have no right to feel what? Everything. The word tore from him. I want everything with you, and I know I can't have it. Shouldn't have it. You'll age and I won't. You'll want things I can't give you: daylight, normalcy, a future that doesn't involve hiding from the sun and living with monsters. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. What if I don't want those things? What if I want this: the library, the history, the purpose I've found here? What if I want you? Don't. His hands tightened on her shoulders. Don't choose this life because you're grateful or feel obligated. I'm not. She reached up, touching his face the way he'd touched hers. His skin was smooth and cold, like marble. I'm choosing it because for the first time since my father died, I feel like I belong somewhere. Because you've shown me trust and respect and partnership. Because when I imagine my future, you're in it. Alara, offer it to me, she said. The choice, mortality or immortality. Let me decide. Lord Kane closed his eyes. If I turn you, there's no going back, no cure, no escape. You'll be bound to this existence forever. I know, you'll outlive everyone you've ever known. Watch the world change beyond recognition. Face dangers I can't always protect you from. I know, and there's no guarantee you'll still want me after a century or two. Immortals change, grow distant from who they were. You might come to hate what you've become. Then I'll hate it with you. She pulled his face down to hers. Adrian, I'm not asking for eternity tonight. I'm asking for the choice. For you to trust me the way I've learned to trust you. He opened his eyes, and she saw centuries of loneliness in them. Centuries of watching, waiting, holding himself apart. And beneath that, something desperately hopeful. The council's term ends in 3 months, he said carefully. If you still want this, then if you're absolutely certain, I'll offer you the choice. Mortality, with my protection and resources to build whatever life you want. Or immortality, as my equal in House Kane. Your equal? Partner, companion. His voice dropped. Whatever you want to be. Alara smiled, feeling something settle in her chest. Then I'll see you in 3 months, Lord Kane. And you'd better be ready for my answer. She kissed him before he could respond, brief, tentative, tasting of tea and tears and possibility. When she pulled away, he looked stunned, 3 months, he agreed hoarsely. Outside, dawn was breaking. They had time. They had all the time in the world. Chapter 11. The final stand. 3 months passed like a held breath. The council's confinement period ended on a warm June evening, and Alara stood in her room at Thornfield, staring at the 2 dresses Katerina had laid out. One was traveling clothes, practical, sturdy, meant for a woman returning to the mortal world. The other was deep midnight blue silk, the kind worn to formal vampire gatherings, a choice made visible. She'd spent the past 90 days working in the library, cataloging centuries of history while her own future hung suspended. Adrian had kept his distance, giving her space to decide without influence. But she felt him everywhere in books he'd marked for her attention. In the conservatory, where fresh tea appeared each evening. In the careful way his brothers treated her, as if she were already family. She reached for the blue silk. The explosion shattered the evening quiet. Alara ran to the window. Flames rose from the east wing, the servants' quarters. Below, figures moved through the smoke, and she heard screams. Not vampires this time, humans. The daylight staff was trapped. She grabbed her cloak and ran. The corridors were chaos. Smoke billowed through the house, and she could hear Thomas shouting for help, trying to organize an evacuation. Sebastian appeared through the haze, his face grim. "It's House Morgana," he said. "Lady Morgana herself. She's brought 50 vampires and set fire to the east wing during daylight hours, when we're most vulnerable. Why? The council approved my protection. The council is fracturing. Some houses believe Adrian's grown too attached to humanity, that you're proof he's gone soft." Sebastian grabbed her arm. "She's declared a formal challenge. Adrian has to answer, but he's barely awake. It's only an hour past sunset. He needs more time." Then buy him time. Alara pulled free. "Get the humans out. I'll help." "Alara, you can't. I know this house better than anyone now. I know the exits, the passages where people shelter." She was already moving. "Trust me." She found Thomas in the servants' hall, trying to break down a jammed door. Behind it, she could hear crying the kitchen staff, trapped by fallen debris. Together, they forced it open, and 6 terrified people stumbled out. "The back stairs," Alara directed. "Down to the kitchens, then out through the garden entrance. Don't stop for anything." They fled. She and Thomas moved through the burning wing, finding 3 more trapped servants, guiding them to safety. The smoke was thick now, choking, and heat radiated from the walls. Part of the ceiling collapsed ahead, blocking their path. "This way," Alara coughed, pulling Thomas down a corridor she'd discovered weeks ago during her explorations. A servant's passage, narrow and hidden, that led to the main house. They emerged into the grand hall to find it transformed into a battlefield. Lady Morgana stood at the center, surrounded by her vampires. She was magnificent and terrible, ancient power radiating from her like heat from a forge. Across from her, Adrian faced her alone, still pale from daylight sleep, but standing firm. "You've violated every law, Morgana," he said. His voice carried, cold and clear. "Attacking during day hours, burning human servants. This isn't a formal challenge, it's slaughter. It's a correction." Lady Morgana's smile was cruel. "You've become weak, Adrian. Obsessed with a mortal girl, losing sight of what we are. The other houses agree you're unfit to lead House Kane, then let the council decide." "Not this. The council is divided. So I'm deciding for them." She gestured, and her vampires advanced. "Kill him. Burn this house to ash. Let's remind London what happens when sentiment overrides survival." Adrian's brothers materialized beside him, Sebastian, Lucian, Marcus, all armed and ready. But they were 4 against 50, and half weakened by premature waking. They were going to lose. Alara didn't think. She ran forward, putting herself between Adrian and Lady Morgana's advancing forces. "Stop." Her voice cracked across the hall. "Lady Morgana, I invoke the right of testimony before assembled houses. You cannot refuse it under the covenant." The advancing vampires froze. Lady Morgana's eyes narrowed. "You dare invoke ancient law?" "I do. I claim the right to speak before judgment is passed." Alara's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "You say Lord Kane is weak because of his attachment to me. But I say his strength comes from understanding both our kinds. From building bridges instead of burning them. Pretty words from prey, then test them. You want to know if I've made him weak?" Alara pulled a silver knife from her cloak, the same one Sebastian had given her months ago. "Let me prove otherwise. Single combat. You're champion against me. If I fall, you can execute Lord Kane and take House Kane. If I survive, you withdraw your challenge and recognize his authority. Alara. No, Adrian started forward, but Sebastian held him back. Lady Morgana laughed. A mortal against a vampire? You'll be dead in seconds. Then you have nothing to lose. Alara lifted her chin. Unless you're afraid a weak mortal might embarrass you. The challenge hung in the air. Around them, vampires murmured, intrigued despite themselves. Lady Morgana's smile sharpened. Very well. I accept your terms. She gestured to a massive vampire with scars crossing his face. Dimitri, don't kill her too quickly. Let her understand her mistake. The vampire stepped forward, and Alara's mouth went dry. He was twice her size, ancient, and utterly confident. She had one knife and desperation, but she also had 3 months of Adrian teaching her vampire weaknesses. 3 months of understanding their patterns, their arrogance, their assumptions about human fragility. Dimitri lunged. Alara didn't try to meet his strength. She dropped low, sliding under his grab, and slashed upward with the silver blade. It caught his inner thigh, a glancing blow, but silver burned. He roared, spinning faster than she could track. His backhand sent her flying. She hit the marble hard, vision blurring, tasting blood. Through the haze, she saw Adrian straining against Sebastian's grip, saw the raw anguish on his face. Get up, she told herself. Get up or he dies. She got up. Dimitri was already advancing, confident now. Alara fainted left, then threw the knife. It wasn't meant to kill, just distract. While his eyes followed the blade, she grabbed a fallen candelabra and swung it at his knee with all her strength. The joint shattered. Dimitri went down with a howl, and Alara was on him, retrieving her knife and pressing it to his throat. Yield, she gasped. For a moment, pride warred with survival in his eyes. Then he lowered his gaze. I yield. Silence crashed through the hall. Alara stood shakily, still holding the knife, facing Lady Morgana across her fallen champion. The terms were clear, she said. Withdraw your challenge. Lady Morgana's expression was unreadable. Then slowly, she smiled, genuine this time, almost approving. Well fought, little mortal. You've made your point. She gestured to her vampires. We withdraw. House Kane keeps its territory and its master. They left as quickly as they'd come, melting into the night. As the last one disappeared, Alara's legs finally gave out. Adrian caught her before she hit the ground, his arms wrapping around her with desperate strength. Don't ever do that again, he said against her hair. Don't ever risk yourself like that. I had to. They would have killed you. Let them. I've lived 3 centuries. You've barely had 20 years and I choose to spend the rest of them with you. She pulled back to look at him. However many that is. However long we have. That's my choice, Adrian. It's always been my choice. His eyes searched hers, and she saw the moment he truly understood. The moment he stopped fighting, what had grown between them. Then I have something to offer you, he said quietly. He led her to the conservatory, where dawn would break in a few hours, and made her the offer he'd promised 3 months ago. Chapter 12. Partnership. The conservatory was quiet in the pre-dawn darkness, lit only by candles that cast dancing shadows across the glass walls. Adrian had dismissed his brothers, sent Katerina to coordinate repairs, left them alone among the night-blooming flowers. Alara sat in the chair where they'd spent countless evenings, her body aching from the fight, but her mind crystalline, clear. Adrian knelt before her, not a position of supplication, but of equality, meeting her eyes at the same level. I'm going to offer you 3 choices, he said, and I need you to understand each one completely before you decide. She nodded, holding his gaze. First, you can leave. Tonight, tomorrow, whenever you wish. I'll provide you with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life. A new identity if you want one. House Kane's protection from any vampire who might threaten you. You'll be free to build whatever future you choose in the mortal world. Second choice, you stay as you are. Human, mortal, aging naturally. You live here at Thornfield, continue your work with the collection, become a formal member of House Kane's household. We'll have years together, perhaps decades if you're fortunate. And when age comes, I'll ensure you're cared for until... He stopped, jaw tightening. Until the end. Alara's throat constricted. The image of herself, old and gray, while Adrian remained unchanged, watching her fade the way he'd watched countless others. It hurt more than she expected. And the third choice, I turn you. Tonight if you want, or a year from now, but I make you what I am, immortal, unchanging, bound to darkness and blood. His hands found hers, cold fingers threading through warm ones. You'd have to feed, Alara, not till we have willing donors. Humans who consent in exchange for payment or other considerations. But you'd still have to take blood to survive. You'd have to give up sunlight forever. You'd watch your mortal friends age and die while you remain frozen at 23. But I'd have you. We'd have each other. For as long as you wanted. Immortals can still die by violence. By choice. There's no guarantee we'd want the same things in a century or two. No guarantee this feeling between us would last. His voice roughened. But I'd have the chance to find out. To build something with you that isn't measured in years but in centuries. Alara looked down at their joined hands. Her skin was flushed with life, warm and pink. His was marble pale, veined with darkness, beautiful in its strangeness. A week ago, she might have hesitated. A month ago, she might have chosen mortality and the comfort of what she knew. But tonight she'd fought beside vampires. Tonight she'd stared down a house elder and won. Tonight she'd discovered she was braver and stronger than she'd ever imagined. I want the third choice, she said, but with conditions. Adrian's eyes widened slightly. Conditions, partnership, not possession. I'm not your pet or your project. If I do this, we're equals in House Kane. I have a voice in decisions, access to the same knowledge and resources, the same rights your brothers have. Done. What else? I finished the cataloging project first. Not because you require it, but because I want to. Because that work matters to me. She squeezed his hands. And you teach me everything: how to feed ethically, how to navigate vampire politics, how to defend myself properly instead of getting lucky with a silver knife. I'll teach you everything I know. I swear it. A pause. Any other conditions? Yes. Alara leaned forward, close enough to see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. You stop treating this like a tragedy. Stop acting like you're cursing me with immortality. I'm choosing this, Adrian. Choosing you. Not because I'm grateful or obligated or don't understand the cost, but because I love you. The words hung between them, simple and devastating. Adrian closed his eyes. You can't possibly. We've only known each other 3 months. 3 months of you teaching me, protecting me, respecting me, when you could have simply commanded. 3 months of watching you care for your brothers, honor your responsibilities, fight for what's right, even when it costs you. Her voice softened. I know what I feel. Do you? He opened his eyes, and she saw 3 centuries of loneliness cracking apart in his expression. I love you, he said hoarsely. I've loved you since you threatened the Night Council with exposure. Since you stood in my library like you belonged there. Since you looked at me and saw someone worth trusting instead of something to fear. Then stop making this a sacrifice. Make it a beginning. Adrian pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. If I do this when I do this, it will hurt. The turning is violent. You'll die briefly, and wake changed. I need you to understand that. I need your full consent. You have it. All of it. Alara pulled back enough to meet his eyes. When? Dawn is 2 hours away. I could do it now. Let you complete the turn while I sleep. You'd wake tomorrow night as one of us. His thumb brushed her cheek. Or we could wait. Give you more time to now. Her voice was steady. I've spent 3 months deciding. I'm ready. Adrian stood, pulling her to her feet. Then there's a ritual. Old words older than the covenant. I'll need to explain what happens. What you'll feel, Adrian. She cupped his face, making him look at her. I trust you. Completely. Just stay with me through it. Every moment. I swear. He kissed her. Then the first real kiss, not tentative like before but deep and claiming. His lips were cold, but his intent was warm, and Alara melted into it, tasting wine and longing and centuries of waiting. When they finally broke apart, he led her to a settee near the windows. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten, not true dawn yet, but its promise. Lie down, he said gently, and listen carefully. She lay back, and he knelt beside her, taking her hand. His other hand brushed her hair back from her throat, and she felt her pulse jump. The turning requires an exchange. I'll drink until you're on the edge of death. You'll feel it, know when it comes. Then I'll offer you my blood. When you drink, the transformation begins. His voice was clinical, but his hand trembled slightly. Your heart will stop. Your body will die. For a few moments, there will be nothing. Then you'll wake, and everything will be different. Sharper, colder, more intense. The hunger will be overwhelming at first. Will you be there? When I wake, I'll be dying through the day, but yes, I'll force myself to stay conscious until you complete the turn. I won't leave you alone for this. Alara smiled. Then I'm ready. Show me what forever looks like. Adrian leaned down, his lips brushing her throat just above the pulse point. I love you, Alara Thorne, in life and in death and in whatever comes after. I love you too, Adrian Kane. Now stop stalling and make me immortal. His fangs pierced her skin, and the world fell away. Chapter 13. Epilogue. A new dawn. Alara woke to darkness that wasn't dark at all. She could see everything, every dust mote floating in the air. Every thread in the velvet curtains, every grain of wood in the ceiling beams 40 feet above. The world had transformed into something hyper-real, overwhelming in its detail and clarity, and she was so desperately hungry. Easy, Adrian's voice, close by. She turned her head. The movement felt strange, too smooth, too fast, and found him sitting beside the settee where she lay. He looked exhausted, pale even for a vampire, but his eyes were alert. The hunger is normal. We expected it. How long? Her voice sounded different, richer somehow. 14 hours. You turned just before dawn. I stayed awake through the day to monitor you. Nearly killed me, but I promised I'd be here. He helped her sit up slowly. How do you feel? Alara took inventory. Her body felt simultaneously foreign and perfect. Stronger, faster. The ache from her fight with Dimitri had vanished entirely. But beneath it all, the hunger gnawed, not painful yet, but insistent, growing. I feel. She searched for words. Alive. More alive than I've ever been. Is that strange? No, that's exactly right. Adrian's smile was soft, relieved. The turning worked cleanly. No complications. You're one of us now, Alara. Fully and completely. She looked down at her hands. Paler than before, veined with delicate tracery. She could see beneath the skin. When she concentrated, she heard her own blood moving slower than human blood, thicker, carrying something other than just oxygen. The hunger, she said. I need to, I know. We have someone waiting. A regular donor, fully consenting, well compensated. Adrian stood, offering his hand. But first, you should see yourself. He led her to a mirror in the corner of the conservatory. Alara had expected not to see her reflection to many myths about vampires, but there she was, transformed. Her face was the same but sharper, as if someone had refined the details. Her eyes were brighter, more intense, catching the candlelight with an inner luminescence. Her skin was porcelain pale, flawless, and when she smiled experimentally, she saw things delicate, retractable, deadly. I'm beautiful, she whispered. You were always beautiful. Now you're eternal. Adrian stood behind her, his reflection joining hers. Two immortals, dark and light, old and new. How does it feel? Right. It feels right. She leaned back against him. Is that wrong? Should I be mourning my mortality? Only if you want to. There's no correct way to feel about this. His arms wrapped around her waist. Some vampires grieve for decades. Others, like you, embrace what they've become immediately. Both are valid. A knock at the door interrupted them. Katerina entered, followed by a young woman, who looked nervous but determined. The donor, Alara, realized. She could hear the woman's heartbeat, smell the blood moving beneath her skin. The hunger spiked and she gasped. This is Margaret, Katerina said. She's been donating to House Kane for 2 years. She understands the process and has consented to help you through your first feeding. Margaret stepped forward, offering a slight curtsy. It's an honor, Miss Thorne. Lord Kane explained what you need. Alara looked at Adrian, suddenly uncertain. I don't know how instinct will guide you, but I'll be here, help you control it. He nodded to a chair. Margaret, if you'll sit. What followed was strange and intimate and utterly natural. Adrian coached her through it, where to bite for minimal pain, how to drink without taking too much, when to stop. Margaret was calm throughout, even seemed to enjoy it in a distant way. And the blood ... It was life itself. Warmth and memory and sensation flooding through Alara, satisfying the hunger, filling emptiness she hadn't known existed. When Adrian gently pulled her back, she felt sated, powerful, complete. Well done, he murmured. Perfect control for a first feeding. Margaret accepted payment from Katerina, a substantial sum, Alara noted, and left with a smile. Alone again, Alara sank into a chair, processing what had just happened. I took her blood. Drank from another person. The words should have horrified her. They didn't, and I'd do it again. You will do it again. Every few days, for the rest of your existence, Adrian sat across from her. Does that disturb you? No, should it? That depends on your ethics. We take only what's freely given. We pay fairly. We ensure our donors are healthy and willing. But we're still predators, Alara. That will never change. She considered this. Then I'll be a predator with principles. Like you. Like us, he corrected. You're not alone in this anymore. The next weeks unfolded like a dream. Sebastian taught her to fight properly, no lucky strikes this time, but real combat training. Lucian educated her on house politics and the delicate balance of vampire society. Even Marcus warmed to her, especially after she beat him in a sparring match. The council formally recognized her transformation. Lady Morgana herself sent a gift, an ancient text on blood magic with a note that read, "Welcome to immortality, little warrior. Try not to waste it." The other houses fell silent. House Ashland was gone, absorbed or scattered. The remaining 6 watched House Kane carefully, wary of Adrian's newly bonded partner and what she represented: change, evolution. The possibility that vampires and humans could be more than predator and prey. Alara continued her work in the library, though now she could read through the night without tiring, could decipher texts in languages she'd never studied, but somehow understood. The collection revealed its secrets to her, and she cataloged them with the same care she'd always shown. But the best moments were the quiet ones, evening walks through the grounds with Adrian, discussing philosophy and history and the future they'd build together. Sitting in the conservatory while he played piano, a skill he'd never mentioned, but which he'd perfected over 3 centuries. Feeding together from willing donors, then holding each other in the darkness. Grateful for every moment. 6 months after her turning, the council summoned them both. They appeared before the 7 houses, not as supplicant and protector, but as partners. Alara wore midnight blue silk and House Kane's crest. She stood at Adrian's right hand, not behind him, not sheltered by him, but beside him. The council recognizes Alara Kane and E. Thorne, Lady Morgana announced, as full member of House Kane, with all rights and privileges thereof. Let it be recorded that she entered our world on her own terms, and claimed her place through courage and will. In the carriage returning to Thornfield, Adrian took her hand. How does it feel, being officially immortal? Alara looked out at London's night streets, the city she'd known as a frightened mortal girl, now transformed into hunting grounds and territories and possibilities. She could live here for centuries, could watch this city evolve, could be part of its secret history. It feels like coming home, she said. Finally. Good. He kissed her hand. Because I have plans for our first century together, starting with expanding the library. I'm thinking we need a whole wing dedicated to modern documentation. Adrian Kane, are you saying you want me to catalog for the next 100 years? Among other things. His smile was wicked. I'm immortal, darling. I can be very patient about getting what I want. Alara laughed, free and genuine and forever young. Then I suppose we'd better get started. We have all the time in the world. And they did, all the time in the world, and each other. And darkness that no longer frightened her, because she'd walked into the vampire's world on her own terms, and made it hers.